everyone, and welcome back to Black and Abroad, an interview series highlighting the lived experiences of Black expats around the world. I am Kendall Tyson, your host, licensed therapist, and a fellow Black expat. We have a great episode in store for you today, and I would like you to welcome my friend Mark. Say hey, Mark.
Hey. Hey, everyone. Hey, everyone. Hey, Miss Kendall.
Hey, honey. We're so excited to have you. And
thank you for having me.
And so Mark Allan Karanja Ngina is a Kenyan script. I said it right?
Yes.
Perfect. He's my friend. He's also a Kenyan scriptwriter, content developer, and copy editor who's worked extensively in the fields of entertainment and journalism. Currently, he's based in Beijing, China. Mark provides a platform for a diverse set of queer voices in China to share their experiences on being queer in China. Mark is particularly passionate about Black, African, and sexual minority-based social justice issues and has penned a few op-eds published on prominent online platforms in Africa and beyond. With a passion for affecting change in and an ethos of being the change one wishes to see in the world, Mark writes from a considered and deeply personal perspective, sharing his own experiences and effectively engaging with the audiences he wishes to connect with. In the future, my friend Mark wishes to be a published author, but for now, he continues to liaison with the queer communities in Beijing and Kenya to effectively share their stories. I am so excited to take a deep dive with you beyond our everyday conversations. So,
as am I.
To get started, I always like to ask the famed question from the interviewee's perspective. Who is Mark?
Well, Mark, that that is a very difficult question for me to answer sometimes, but I would think starting from what is most important to me, I think Mark is a very loving son and a caring friend, but also someone who enjoys his craft, and my craft is storytelling. And at the moment, at this time in my life, I do so by being a copy editor. Before, I've worked, as you said in the very, very long introduction, I've worked as a content developer. Yeah, it was. I've worked as a content developer, as a scriptwriter. So I've been able to express myself through those ways. But I think the main thing for me is Mark is a loving individual, or strives to be a loving individual, I think.
Okay, I have personal experience. I can attest to that is true. So I'm curious. I do have obviously questions to answer, but I like things to flow organically. How is it that you got into the field that you're currently in with copy editing?
So that is a long story that goes back to Kenya, and how I ended up in the field of content development was I got a part-time job on a set in Kenya. As of all things, I worked as an assistant in the wardrobe department. Okay. But I still had a passion for writing. I'd always tried to write, but it's a very, very difficult field to break into in Kenya, especially unless you have connections. And from there, I had the ear of the CEO of the company, and I'm truly grateful to her. Her name is Dorothy Gituba. She is now the head of Netflix original series Africa. So wow, she is somebody. And she was known to everyone in the industry in Kenya as someone who gave people their first chances. Like, if you are anyone in the industry at the moment, chances are that you passed through her company that was Spielworks Media. And that's exactly what happened. And when she was about to launch a new show, she said, listen, you can sit in a writer's meeting, you can sit in on a writer's meeting and see if this is truly something that you want to do. And I was given a chance to write my script, and I wrote a script for this show. And the funniest thing happened, the very, very first script that I wrote for this show got nominated for the AMVCAs in Africa. That's like the African Oscars, if you will, as the best script in the series thus far. So as far as validation is concerned, that was the biggest validation I'd ever gotten or I would ever get. And then I subsequently went on to head write for a couple of shows and be part of the content development team there and in other production houses. Then when I came to China, I mean, China is a completely different monster. The only way you can break into the film and television industry is, we'll get into that later on, I'm sure. But you know, if you're from certain countries or if you have certain linguistic abilities, I do have linguistic abilities, but not the the desirable origins, if you will. But I was able to get a job at an English speaking or an English publication here in China. And that's how you and I met, because I interviewed you for an article. And then from there, I ended up getting this position that I have now, that is a copy editor. My goodness, I'm just flustered. I'm sorry. I'm now a copy editor at the Global Times. So that has been my trajectory so far.
Okay, it sounds quite interesting and definitely going to be a part of your life story, I'm sure.
I would hope so. It's been a lot of work. It's been a lot of, sleepless nights, a lot of polishing and working on my craft. It's not one of the easiest things to do in the world, because it's not to say that any other job has levels of mediocrity, but when you are in content development, when you work as someone who uses their words to express and communicate, you really do need to know what you're saying, when you're saying it, and how you're saying it, because just the use of one wrong word and you lose your audience, or things get misunderstood. And especially now in the environment that we're in, the world that we're in, where people are very, very sensitive about not only what they say, but about what they hear, you have to be especially careful. You really have to hone your craft in order to be able to utilize it the right way.
I agree with you. It's kind of the same thing with therapy. It's not anything you can sleep on. It's constantly changing. And we know that words matter. Words carry a lot of weight. So choosing them wisely and effectively is extremely important. And it's a power to be able to wield. How do you wield that in a positively transformative way? Which I want to ask you, I'm wondering, how long have you been abroad?
This will be my 5th year. This will be my 5th year. Yes.
So being here 5 years, what would you say is one of the most, defining moments of your time here in China?
I would say, well, first of all, attending uni here, because I did do a year or two of uni here, just learning Chinese, because you need to be able to do that if you're hoping to break into this industry in any meaningful way.
Right.
But also working in publishing here, working as a content developer, as a writer, as a copy editor here is very, very different. And I think once I got into this world, I suddenly understood that there are different ways of being in the world, that especially we people who come from the West, as much as it is, take for granted. And it's very much a learning curve. As far as one defining moment, I don't think there has been one, because I've had so many wonderful transformative experiences, both, wonderful transformative experiences, but also negative experiences that have changed my perspective on a lot of things. I don't think I could be able to pinpoint one exact moment when I had an aha moment or an awakening of sorts. I think it's very much a gradual building up to an awakening or a realization or a growth. As far as China is concerned, I feel like with other countries, because I have a lot of friends and family who live and work abroad, and the way they would explain their experiences to me was very much, it's a jarring experience. It's very much you're there and something happens and you suddenly realize, Dorothy, you're not in Kansas anymore, something like that. Whereas here, China is more like a slow burn, at least for me, in my experience. It's very much small little things creep up on you, every once in a while something happens that jolts you out of your comfort zone, or something small that you might otherwise disregard happens, and you can learn from it if you choose to, or you can just disregard it. And more times than not, I think we as expats choose not to learn from these situations, but I try to be a student of life, and those moments have definitely transformed my experience and my perspective on life in general.
I hear that. So with, the work that you've chosen to do and living your life honestly on a daily basis, I'm wondering, how has choosing to shine a light and have more of a focus on queer identities and experiences help to kind of shape your time here, how you're able to relate to others living in the country?
So a lot in terms of queer identity for me has happened in my life, both in Kenya and here. Many people might not know this, but in Kenya, it is not necessarily illegal to be gay or to be attracted to someone of the same gender. What is illegal is homosexual acts, but these are things that you can't really prove. But it's not even about that, it's about how society perceives you. So when I was growing up, I didn't know any other way of being, and because I was outed, I wasn't given an opportunity to come out by myself. I was forced out into the open, and it was by a teacher of all people.
Wow.
And yeah,
I'm so sorry.
It was, I always say it was actually a very good thing, because I don't think, were I not pushed out, I don't think I would have ever gotten the courage myself to live in my truth. I think that jarring moment, or that situation of being forced to come to terms with who you are, really did help me truly and firmly stand in my truth. Because, not to go into too many details, but or people around me did try to, pray the gay away, beat the gay away, therapy the gay away, whatever it was. And it just didn't work. And at some point, I just had to look at myself and go, this is me, and this is who I am. And through my life, and especially coming to China, I would meet a lot of people who would, would talk about me and myself, and how I was presenting myself to them as this revolutionary thing. And I just couldn't understand it, because, I was just me. There's nothing really special about what I was doing. There was nothing particularly out of the ordinary as far as I was concerned, because I knew a lot of people who were doing the exact same thing, but I realized it was because of my circumstances and my history, and also my nationality, that makes whatever it is, me living in my truth, as people say these days, or living my authentic existence, or accepting my authentic self, such a revolutionary thing. And I realized a lot of people were looking for that inspiration, to be able to do that, to be able to be their authentic selves. Because, I am very, very lucky, and have been very lucky, even still while being in Kenya and here in China. I've never had to change who I was or who I am for the sake of a job, for the sake of a relationship, for whatever reason. And there's so many people here and back home who live double and triple lives. So there is the person that they are with their families, there's the person that they are at the office, and then there's the person that we see out and about, and it would always trouble me that people would be very clear about setting those very weird boundaries, as far as I was concerned, that, because you are a part of my social life and this side of me, I will never bring you around to my family because they don't know this part of me, and also never come to the office because they really don't know this part of me. Whereas with me, it was, I am me in the office, I am me at home, I am me by myself, I am me around people. And you know, if that gives people inspiration, wonderful. And being a storyteller and also being able to use my words as a tool has helped me to not only express myself, but also express the fears and the hopes and the desires and the experiences of others that are safeguarded me, are given to me, or entrusted to me, because people feel with me such experiences are validated, they are understood, and they can be expressed in a respectful and palatable manner. Because that's the other side of it. Like, how do you tell the world that this thing that for so long was considered so wrong, but you know, at the moment there seems to be that such identities are in vogue, which is something we're going to talk about, I'm hoping. How do you express it, not as, you know, this cultural movement or this negative thing, but as people just wanting and trying to live their lives the best way they know how, without causing offense to others, but also telling the world, please do not hurt me because of who I am. And that was what I kept on trying to say and do throughout my entire life, because I would not understand why my being myself was such a problem to other people. You know, my just coming around, walking down the street, minding my own business was such a big problem to other people. And people did not realize or understand that I would constantly have to make these calculations and self-calibrate myself or recalibrate myself constantly for other people's comfort. Right. And at some point it just stopped. And I suppose people notice that, and I try to help other people also come to that point where they also say, you know what, I'm really just tired of living for other people. I'm tired of splitting myself between three realities. I just want my reality. And my reality is valid, and my reality is okay, and my reality should be acknowledged, even if not accepted, because you don't expect everyone to love and accept you. Just acknowledge it, you know?
I hear you. I would imagine that having a level of self-acceptance with having to sift through all of everybody else's noise would be the most important factor. Because there's this saying that I don't remember where it comes from, but I use it often, is if we're living by other people's acceptance, we're gonna die by their criticism. Yes. But I know that there's an additional layer. I have an understanding, I don't know, you know, personally, but I have an understanding that there's an additional layer when it comes to living your life in the open, you know, honestly, of safety, and, you know, how is that going to impact your everyday ability to survive and thrive? And then on the other side, your mental health. So as you know, were having to identify all of these, you know, things in your life and figuring out what does it look like to live your life authentically, and, you know, really having to come to terms with how you wanted to be, whether it's palatable, you know, to others or not. I'm wondering, what are some shifts in your mental health that you noticed took place?
Oh my goodness. I think maybe the biggest one has always been, I've always been very, 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 very hard on myself. Very, very, very hard on myself. Because you realize from the get-go, as soon as you enter a room or as soon as people realize who you are, you're starting at a negative. And you're trying to build up positives, or it's just downhill from there. Like it's a daunting prospect. For a child, a teenager, even an adult, to realize there's virtually nothing I can do that will be acceptable to anyone around me just because of this one thing. So I need to be, there's this thing that I think a lot of African Americans say, in America, you have to be twice as good, you know, for half the validation or something of the sort. And, yes. And that was something that I felt I had to go through. So what I would do, and I've had to learn not to do that to myself, is I would take myself apart constantly to think, what is the worst possible thing that anyone could say about me and how can I fix it? Or at the very least, prepare myself mentally, like create mental buffers so that if and when it happens, I can honestly say, and, you know, like this, whatever you're telling me is not news to me. I know who I am. I know A, B, C, D, but it was always about negatives. It was never about positives. And I realized that for a lot of the time, for a majority of my life, even though I thought I was living an authentic life for myself, I was doing a lot of the things to prove a point to everyone else, you know? So, you know, I didn't have, I wasn't just going to be a scriptwriter. I had to be the best one. I wasn't just going to be part of the content developing team. I had to be the leader of the content developing team. I wasn't just going, you know, I wasn't just going to be well-dressed. I had to be excellently dressed and all of these things, constantly trying to exude excellence, because I understand that in the face of my reality, in the face of my queer identity, excellence just becomes average. So the two cancel each other out. So that people qualify whatever it is I do as, he's okay for a gay guy. He's okay for this. He is doing okay. And all of my mistakes were always not because I'm human, not because people in that industry or that country or that place are prone to error. It was because of my identity. And it really did do a number on me, because you realize there's some people who you cannot convince that this is not true, that what they're doing is they're gaslighting you, that no matter what you do, wrong or right, you'll always be on the losing end.
Well, let me ask you, oh, there's an echo. Let me ask you this, knowing that, or coming to that conclusion, if you realize that just being yourself, certain people will feel however they feel, at what point did you make the decision to, because I heard you say that, you know, spending a lot of time looking at things from a deficit of what's wrong, what can't go right. How, like, when did you then begin to shift your thinking to, that's something I can't control, so how do I now begin to look at the ways in which I can care for myself, take care of myself, you know, see the positive, look for solutions? When did you, have you noticed a shift in your perspective when it comes to others and how they may or may not treat you?
I think that happened fairly recently. I think maybe a year or two ago, where an incident at work made me really question myself, because there was a doubt about my efficacy as someone in the, you know, in the position that I was in. And it was because of who I was. And I just had to I just had to stop myself and go, it doesn't really matter what I do at this point. I mean, if this person who had my resume, has seen my experience, has worked alongside me, would still turn around and cast aspersions, cast doubts about my efficacy, or my expertise in this thing that we are working in this field that we're working in, then there's really nothing else I can do. I can only just work on me. I can only just do the best for me, not the best to prove a point, because clearly a point wasn't being proven, you know? And at some point I really started resenting this life of living for others, you know, like people do congratulate you for all of the things that you've been able to do, but you realize I really cannot fully, I don't know whether this will, well, you will guide me with the language. That's why we're here. But you cannot fully accept, credit for whatever it is that you've done, because you know your motivation behind the things that you've done was not for you. The motivations behind what you were doing were never pure. So even when you get, even a compliment in itself becomes an insult. It becomes a reminder that you are not living authentically, that you're not moving authentically, that you're not working authentically. And it becomes almost like an insult to the self, like a self-inflicted insult or a self-inflicted injury, when you realize I've been putting myself through the paces all of these years for validation from others, and it's never been forthcoming. And the one person who needed to validate me was me. And I've never been able to do that because I'm still working from a point of deficit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. Whose deficit though? Because I hear what you're saying, right? And I get how painful it's been, but I also hear that the deficit that you believe that you feel to be working under is attributed from other people, not yourself. Yeah. So tell me, what does it look like to then, begin to shift your gaze again and not see yourself from a deficit? You're no less than anybody else. You come just as qualified, more qualified, So how do you then begin to shift your speech and thinking and chosen perspective to not see yourself from a place of deficit? Because I know that affects your mental health. That results in depression and anxiety, burnout. We got to try to be all the things to all the people. But you stated that you are the one that needs to begin to validate yourself, right? Yes. Or realizing that that's where the most important source of validation comes from. So what does it look like for you, not being overly concerned with other people's perspectives? How do you now begin to accept that who you are, where you are at this moment is not deficient, but it is sufficient?
I usually call this new age speak, but it is effective. But what I essentially started doing, I don't want to do that third person, because that's also another thing I used to do a lot of, is speak about myself in the third person. What one needs to do, what one needs to do, all of those things. What I started doing was speaking positivity to myself. And I think the main thing was I started allowing myself my humanity, because I felt that was a thing that was taken away by myself, by others. I did not allow myself to be human. I did not allow myself margins of error, because already from a societal perspective, I am an error. I am an anomaly. So, there's no way an error can ever be correct. People might want to say,
if you're looking at it from their perspective.
When you're looking at it from their perspective, and that's what, because I mean, as much as we would hate to admit it, or some of us might hate to admit it, we really are products of our environments. And that was the environment I grew up in. That's the environment I came to maturity in. So that is something that has been entrenched in me for a very, very long time. And it was a process of unlearning. And it was a process of saying, what is it that everyone else allows themselves to do that I don't allow myself to do? When you can call it excuses, you can call it, a cop-out, whatever it is. And the thing is, if you listen to the language used by people, is they're basically saying, give me a break, I'm human. Give me a break, I'm human. And that was never something I was ever allowed to do, and I never allowed myself to do. But now I say, if I make a mistake, I'm human. If I do something, it's not superhuman. It's not because there's something fantastic about me. It's because that is within my human ability. I do not want to be venerated, and I do not want to be castigated. I do not want to live in these two extremes. I just want to be here, acknowledged. And the acknowledgement started to come from me, myself, when I said, I will allow myself my mistakes. I will revel in my own triumphs. I will acknowledge myself. I will not wait for validation from others, because even the validation that I would get would come with strings attached, whether positive, when people say, yes, whatever it is, or whether it would be attached to, well, he's okay for insert adjective, and yeah, that's what I allowed myself, to be human.
I'm glad. And I'm glad that you shared that, because there's somebody that's going to have a level of liberation by just hearing you say, give yourself permission to be human, give yourself permission to live in your honesty. Yes, people will think what they want. However, you get to determine what you ascribe to yourself. And I noticed that you share, messages that may have been passed down, from where you're from and family. And I'm wondering what were some of those when it comes to like mental health and things of that nature, taking care of yourself? What were some of those cultural understandings and messages that you found to be passed down to you?
first of all, there's no such thing as mental illness as far as people back home are concerned. Secondly, there's no such thing as being human. I think maybe you might have had this experience if you had friends from African families back home. You realize that kids from African homes hold themselves to a very, very high standard. And that's not just outside of the continent. That is in Africa as well, because they're very limited resources and we're all competing for the same limited resources. So you have to be not just excellent, you must be excellent among the excellent. There is a level of excellence that seems unattainable. It is achievable, but it is a painful process to get there. But the thing about it was, if it was very religiously coded language, and I do resent it every once in a while because it alienated myself from something that helped me through difficulty, which was spirituality and being able to talk to God or to talk to whatever entity it is that you might believe in for whoever is watching.
Right. Wherever your source of power comes from.
Yeah, wherever you believe the power comes from, that entity, because I felt at that point in moments of alienation, that was my only outlet and that was my source of strength. And it was, this thing that you are is a direct insult to our religion. It means that you have demons. It means that you're mentally deficient. It means that you're a sexual deviant, that you're depraved, and there's no salvation for you. That was the thing about it, that you are left in the trash heap of life and everyone wants to look past you. That landfill that everyone can smell and see, but nobody wants to acknowledge, that becomes you. And that becomes your existence. And when you say that this is hurting, this hurts you in one way or another, that is negated because you're told it's your fault for choosing to become this. But then again, you do a double take and go, but I thought it was a demon. How do I choose to have a demon in me? Like there are very many conflicting ideas here, but it's always, there's always a caveat to every point. There's always a caveat. There's, well, it's demons. Can we pray it away? No, but we're still going to blame you for choosing this. But also it's this vicious cycle where there's nobody really gives you an answer and never provides an avenue for you to give questions.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. What does your systems of support look like growing up?
In all honesty, they were non-existent. As I said, I was outed by my teacher. And that then became—
I want to fight her. Like, I want to fight her.
Oh, it was her.
I want to fight him. I'm sorry.
And when I think about my coming out story, the only thing I can remember is being called into the principal's office and having to come clean about what I felt, and having this man sit across from me and tell me just how depraved I was.
Oh, wow.
And then moments later, finding out that they had called my mother behind my back, or unbeknownst to me. I think it's better because it's like, oh, there was a betrayal. No, unbeknownst to me. And I walked into this room to find my mother. And I'm an only child, first of all, and my mother is a single mother. So, me and my mother have always been like this.
Right.
And I've always been the apple of her eye. I found her, this woman who was very, very strong, and I remember her being very strong, distraught, in tears, completely broken. And I remember, I was about 12 or 13. I remember thinking to myself, I've done this to her, and I will forever have to live with this. And I had to get down on my knees now she was in the director's office, it was a private school, whatever. But I had to get down on my knees in the director's office and have the school chaplain lay hands on me to pray the gay away. Like, seriously, this happened.
Wow.
And when I went to high school, that was the year before I went to high school. Then I went to high school, and obviously people who I was in primary school with knew about this, and of course they carried on the information. And I was just ostracized. And I remember my school's discipline master, and later on, one of my class teachers. I think for you guys in America, it would be a homeroom teacher, but in Kenya, it's a different system. You have a classroom teacher who is assigned to your class for a year or a couple of years. I remember just how much he relished punishing me. He would punish me for any little offense, imagined or real. And, you know, as I said, my thing was, I knew that I was different. I knew that I was starting at a deficit. So I would constantly take apart everything that would be a source of criticism, or that would put me in the line of, you know, that fire. Would lead to punishment. Yeah, in the line of fire. And even with all of that, like I was, for all intents and purposes, I was a model student. I was never late to school. I would finish my assignments, ABCD. I was never at the top of the class, but I was never at the bottom of the class, you know.
Right. Not giving
I was yeah, you know, I was excellent in some subjects, and I was poor in others. I was very good in arts, and I was poor in sciences. That was my Achilles heel. But I remember just, you know, the things that other people would get away with and what I would be punished for. And I remember, because he was my physics teacher, I will always remember him. And sometimes I actually have nightmares about him. It was that bad. I remember he was my physics teacher, and at the end of our second year in high school, we get to pick which subjects we choose. And I was really, really bad at physics, and I chose biology instead. And he said to me, this person who was charged with the responsibility of taking care of minors, basically, I am so happy I will never see you again in any of my classes. That's what he said to me.
Wow. Wow.
And there's so many instances, especially in high school, because at the time, my mother had been convinced that a combination of a regimen of prayer and therapy would lead me down the right path eventually. And I saw a succession of therapists at the time, and I would honestly just lie to them. I would tell people anything they needed to hear just to leave me alone. And the worst part about it was, they were convinced in the lie. These people who were meant to be professionals, because they themselves thought this exact same thing that everyone else around me thought, that there was something deficient about me, that even their professionalism would not allow them to set aside their prejudices in the face of a child who actually needed help. And there was one who was convinced, because I was, and I believe I still am, rather effeminate, who was convinced that the only logical explanation for what I was and what I am was and is, I was transgender, I was transsexual. And what she did was, she made a show and tell of me in one of her lectures, because she was a university lecturer. She asked me to dress up as a girl and show up to one of her lecture halls. And I had these, I think they were master's or doctoral students. I don't quite remember, but they were students nonetheless in the field of psychology, just berate me and take everything apart, because, you know, there were these people who were like, well, you don't even look like a girl, and why would anyone want to look like a girl? And, you know, this is just demonic, and ABCD. These were people who were training to be mental health care professionals. Just so that you remember, just so that you understand how jarring it was even for me. And what happened was, through this process, I grew extremely distrustful of authority figures. I grew very wary of the idea of professionalism, because these people were not worth their grain in salt as far as whatever it is that they were peddling as their profession. Right. And I could only imagine that these people, or right now, I just shudder at the thought of how many kids like myself have been subjected to that might not have had the mental wherewithal to at least make up lies on the spot to at least protect their mental health, because I feel that did protect me. That did create a buffer for me.
Right. Well,
who were broken down in these systems. Yeah.
Right. Well, let's, I can hear how painful that was. And I, again, am quite sorry that that's something that you had to experience. If where you are today, the level of understanding and healing, and reclaim power that you have, if you were to offer one suggestion to like parents of children that might, that have a queer identity, what's one piece of advice that you would offer them? Like parents back home or parents here or anywhere, what would you say?
It would be your child's biggest advocate. It's making me feel emotional just thinking about it.
It's okay. This is safe. You are helping somebody reach a level of inspiration through your sharing, and I appreciate it.
Because as a child, your main and only objective, your main and only purpose in life, whether or not people believe this, is to make your parents happy and proud. And there's nothing that children do, even when, as a mental healthcare professional, you might be able to say this, but I believe even when kids act out, it is because they're trying to get attention. They're not deliberately trying to hurt
their communicating,
their parents, their guardians, people around them. It is a call. It's
communication.
It's in the way they know how. Asking for help and acknowledgement. And that's the thing that I could not understand, why all of these people who were so much older than me believed that I was such a malicious person to want to do this thing, not only to myself, but to the people that I loved the most, And yes, just be your child's biggest advocate, because the world out there is already set to destroy your child. Don't make it easy for the world to do so. Yeah. Don't give the world that in. When people say, I don't understand it, and especially this happens a lot with African parents when something wrong happens with their child, is this recoil, askance. I cannot understand where this could have possibly gone wrong. When you were given opportunity after opportunity to reach out to your child, to listen to your child, to advocate on behalf of your child, because you have the voice, you have the social power, you have the social capacity to do so for your child. But what you did was exactly what everyone else in society was looking to do to your child, which is demonize your child. Why would anyone want to do that? And one piece of advice: just advocate for your child. Yeah, that's all.
I think with that very salient information, advice, advocacy can only happen if you listen. Yes. Right? Advocacy isn't a selfish thing. Advocacy is removing your wishes and tapping into the wishes and desires and needs of your child that, like you said, doesn't have the social capital, the resources. So I would say effectively doing your part to remove the barriers from your child getting the type of help and support that they need to grow up into mentally well, fully functioning members of society.
Yes, exactly. It really does break my heart when I hear, because I've heard a lot of people who've gone through similar experiences to me, as me. And on my blog, I wrote this article called Invisible Leash, and how queer people, especially we from Africa, are constantly petrified at the idea of going back home, at the idea of going back to that thing that was happening to us back there, and having to recalibrate ourselves and our identities to fit that place. And, you know, when I was growing up, I'd hear people go, you know, how could you do this? How could you do this to us and our family and our school and our class and our friendship? And, you know, you just want to ask someone, like, as I was making reference to the article, I make mention of a transgender woman back in Kenya who was in my circle of friends, or people who knew people, I think 1 or 2 degrees removed from me, who was brutally murdered. And her body was dumped. And you just want to ask people, why would I want to choose an identity that puts me in constant peril?
Yeah.
You know, at the best of times, it will earn me derision from society, will make my life that bit more difficult. But we know of people who've been killed over this.
Yeah.
We know of people who have had to leave their homes and families and friends over this, who have had to seek asylum in other countries because of this. Why would I choose deliberately to make my life and those of the ones I love deliberately difficult?
Right.
That is a question that I wish people who are, you know, have all these phobias, you know, homophobic, transphobic, whatever kind of phobia you have, to ask yourself, because this is not an easy existence. And this person is not calling attention to themselves. This person is just saying, I found myself this way. I happen to be in the minority. All I am looking for is space to be myself.
Yeah. So then, you know, because I know, like, here in the US, there's been an uptick in murders of Black trans women and trans women of color. So you know, we have just a few more questions. When it comes to, like, creating community and systems of support at this stage, I'm wondering what has been some of your advocacy work to support your community in that regard?
So as you said in my intro, I've always been of the opinion, or I've always tried to strive to be the change that I want to be. And I try to dig into or tap into my own past experiences and my lowest moments to remember just how I felt, not having people around me, not having the vocabulary, not having the avenues to help me get through those situations. And I try to mitigate that for other people. I try to be that support, whether it be, you know, sharing people's stories by writing a blog about it, or even just being very honest, brutally honest about my own experiences and say, listen, I've been through it as well. And I've made it to the other side pretty okay. I have a few scuff marks, but I am okay. Yeah. And I remember you and I were having a conversation, and you told me to save this part for this, so I will use it now. One of my biggest inspirations was my grandmother, and my grandmother basically used her life as a ministry to people. She was a deeply religious and spiritual person, and the only word I can use to describe that woman is love. Love that transcended race, linguistic barriers, even sexualities, because I never heard her say a single mean word to me, you know, when some of my other family members had a few choice words to say about me. And has even transcended her death, because even now, years after her passing, people still talk about her life. And there is a prayer that she taught me. Again, I'm getting emotional, but it said, Lord, make my life a force for good. Show me how to be a force for change. And if that is not my destiny, show me how I could help others who are. That is what I've been trying to do with my life.
What I need you to do, thank you first off for sharing that. To write that down in as many places as you can and recite that to yourself. Let that be what we call like a best hope. Like that is your running mantra on a daily basis. And that will help you whenever you're having your low moments or whenever things are just difficult, to begin to shift your gaze from the problems to how do I allow what it is that I'm experiencing to propel me and push me and fuel me to help not only myself, but others in their very difficult times.
Yes.
I am so glad. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Let's thank her. I'm sure she's in heaven smiling down at us.
Oh, she's watching. She's like, thank you, baby. Thank you
Miss
for
Grace.
giving me my roses, for sure. So, you know, we endure a lot, right? And it can be taxing just being Black in general, living in the world. And then you add on that the different labels and identities that we, you know, walk into. I'm wondering, what are some things that you do to take care of yourself?
Oh, well, I have allowed myself, to settle into active laziness. I know that sounds funny, but as I said, I'm someone who tries to live a very purposeful and a very action-oriented life. I'm always aware of what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, where I'm doing it, and with whom. And that can be a little draining to the soul. And sometimes in the spirit of being human, sometimes I don't want to do stuff. Sometimes I don't want to pick up the phone. Sometimes I don't want to go out. Sometimes I don't want to do the laundry. I just want to sit in my house and watch a movie and, you know, chill with my dog and allow myself mini vacations, as many little mini vacations as I can. I call them moments of active laziness. That's what I do for myself. And also reading. I read a lot.
Okay, you do, because you know, when we go to game night, you'd be knowing all the information.
Yeah, I'm a little smarty pants.
Yeah, you are. Let me ask you this final question, and then we'll do our rapid fire, and then I'll give you the opportunity to share your, you know, your brief last words. When you think about mental health in our community, what would be your hopes for the advancement of mental health in Black communities around the world?
To not use religion as a band-aid for everything.
Lord.
Just today, literally, I was having a conversation with my mom, and I was sharing some of my worries, and you know, as she's gotten older, she's also, as you know, the ladies in our communities, whether in Africa or abroad, tend to find Jesus later on in life, and they do tell everybody about it. And you know, the Lord is her shepherd, and I'm very glad that the Lord leads her, and I'm very appreciative that the Lord is there to take care of her while I'm not there. But it has become, it gets to a point sometimes where we're not even able to have conversations without it just being brushed under the rug of, well, the Lord will find a way. You know, the Lord will provide, the Lord will this, the Lord will that. And we were talking about something, and I said, I had to, first of all, say, do not tell me the Lord will A, B, C, D. Because I said, the Lord, if we do believe in all this, the Lord has given us abilities, has given us avenues, has given us his angels, his people on earth, his emissaries on earth. He has diffused his knowledge to people all over the world, whether it be doctors and teachers and lawyers, whoever it is. When we talk about professions and expertise, if you are a true believer, then you know that is a gift from God. So do not be looking heavenward when the help is right in front of you. Do not be afraid to go seek therapy, because our therapist has been given that brain by the Lord himself. Okay? Do not be praying for an illness. Go to the doctor, because that doctor has been ordained by God. In the same way that you do not sit in the house and minister to yourself, and this is what I wonder with our community a lot of the time, you do not minister to yourself, you trust reverends and priests and all these people who've been ordained in the faith to minister to you. Why do you not want to be ministered to in other ways as well? If you believe that this person in front of you is an emissary of God, then why isn't everyone else who is in every other profession also an emissary of the Lord? And especially in mental health. What I want for our people to stop doing is, first of all, shaming people who have mental issues, telling them that it is because of a certain deficiency. Right now, there's a lot of talk, especially in the Black community, about, you know, the reason why there's so many people with these issues and those issues is because of lack of strong male role models. And, you know, I just want to say, we do have those role models. And those role models lacked the mental wherewithal to deal with their mental issues, and they have passed it on to us in this society. So it is not, do not leave the person in need of help holding the bag. Reach out and help them. But most importantly, there should not be any stigma in reaching out or seeking help, especially professional help. We're very comfortable seeking help around the kitchen table during that kitchen table talk. We're very good at that. And these are people who do not know a single thing about the mind, about mental well-being. Why wouldn't we be able to have such conversations with people who have learned to do so?
I hear you.
That is my hope.
Like being more welcoming of different attitudes, different sources of support, you know, avenues of help. If we have a toothache, we go to the dentist, right? When our heart is broken, or when we're experiencing depression or anxiety, first, understanding what that looks like in our population, and like you said, not demonizing it, and doing what we can to remove the barriers, stigma being one of the bigger ones, and giving people like that love and support and that push to do the thing that's going to help set them, help them heal, help them feel better, help them recover from traumatic situations, as opposed to piling on.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
For sure. I hear that. Well, let's kind of transition. You've dropped a whole lot of gems today. And I'm quite grateful for it. Let's transition into just a few little rapid fire questions before, you know, you give your last word. So I'm gonna say something. You give me the first thought that pops into your mind.
Oh Lord, I don't know whether that's a good idea, but let's do this.
What's one thing you love about yourself?
My mind.
Oh, okay. I would agree with that. Give me a word to describe yourself.
Caring.
Okay. And what's your favorite country to visit?
India.
Really? I've never been. We on landlocked, so if we ever get to see the outside world again,
I would highly recommend it. It's as far as countries to travel while Black, I think India is definitely up there.
Okay. Yeah. So what's your, besides the laziness part that you shared about self-care, what's another favorite activity that you like to do?
Hanging out with friends, including you.
Give us your favorite, well, I think you shared it earlier, your grandmother's saying. Can you repeat for us her statement that you shared?
Yes. Lord, make my life a force for good. Make my life a force for change. And if that is not my destiny, help me help those who are. Yes.
And we'll leave it with, what is it that you love about your culture?
The multifaceted nature of my culture, that I am allowed to be many things at the same time. That I tell people, if you want to really think about how Africans view their identities, the way I think of myself is, first of all, I am from my tribe. I am a Kikuyu man from my city in Nairobi, and I am Kenyan, then East African, then African. And that is the beauty of being from my culture, that I can be Western and African, that I can be traditional and modern, and all of these things encompassed into one.
I hear
without
you.
having to worry that one takes over the other.
Right. So all of them can exist at the same time, for sure.
Yes, yes.
Well, we have neared the end of our interview. So I would like for you to briefly share, what is something that you want, people to take away from our talk today?
I would like for people to dig into themselves and not be afraid to look at the battle scars that they have gotten through life, because they are the ones that help us learn how to fight the next battle. And the fact that you have a scar means that you've healed. It might be ugly, but it's also a reminder that you've healed and you're strong enough to heal, that your body, that your mind, that your spirit have the capacity to reinvent themselves, to transform, to transfigure themselves, and be ready for the next battle. Is an amazing, amazing thing about being human. And it is a wonderful reminder that you are still alive and there's still hope. That is the biggest thing. There's still hope.
Those are some amazing words to ascribe to, listen to, take in as your own. And I am so grateful to you for sharing your insights and your thoughts and feelings and experience with us today.
Thank you. As the sun sets, my beautiful son is leaving, and now you can only see this part of me.
Well, I want to, thank everyone. Again, thank you, Mark. And then thank everyone else for tuning in tonight to Black and Abroad. I encourage you to keep taking risks. I encourage you to keep impacting your communities. And most importantly, make sure that you're making time to prioritize your mental health. Please share this within your communities. And I want everyone to be well and be your best. And with that, we're going to say good night. Bye-bye. Peace.
Bye-bye. 再见. Peace.
再见.